Hi, welcome to video 2. This is all about genes and nature versus nurture. We're all very familiar with the fairly recent idea that to some extent we are determined by the genetic information passed on by our parents. My nana wasn't very secure on this idea. When I had my son in the Caribbean, she thought he would be born with Afro-Caribbean features despite both his parents being Caucasian. The biological approach to psychology has grown significantly over the past few years with the development of new techniques, for instance, the sequencing of the human genome in 2000. It hasn't been as simple as finding a gene for autism or depression or schizophrenia, but we still seek to discover the role genes play in our personalities. I've highlighted the things on the checklist to which this video refers. So we wouldn't expect cats to have a baby raccoon, only kittens, because they've only got kitten DNA to pass on. What is DNA? Well, a gene consists of a set of instructions, and it carries information. Our genotype is what we would be according to our perfect genetic plans. The phenotype is genetics and environment. So, for instance, you may have the gene to be 6.5 feet tall. However, you get inadequate nutrition during your childhood and you only grow to be 5'8". So your genotype is 6.5 feet, but your phenotype is 5'8". Make sure you can remember the difference between a genotype and a phenotype. Down syndrome is a consequence of having an extra chromosome 21. This is known as trisomy, as there are 3 chromosomes instead of a pair. Generally, this syndrome affects 1 in 700 pregnancies, and it's associated with older mothers. Some people with Down syndrome are able to live independently, and others need constant nursing attention. Sometimes genes don't influence people unless there's an environmental stressor. We don't tend to think of post-traumatic stress disorder as being genetic, but Browser found a genetic variant that predisposed people to suffer it. There was an armed robbery, and she found that the people with SLC6A4 were more likely to get PTSD. But they wouldn't have got it had they not been in the armed robbery in the first place. So what do psychologists mean when they talk about nature versus nurture? The people who emphasize nature suggest that we're born with everything that we will ever need for the person we will become. Even our characteristics that mature as we grow older have their roots in our genes. People who emphasize nurture emphasize experience and learning. The actual debate is which of these is the most important to the developing human. Let's have a look at quite an odd case. Meet James Arthur Springer and James Edward Lewis. They were twins and they were given up for adoption to separate parents at 1 month old. They were reunited aged 39. They had each married and divorced a woman named Linda and then married a Betty. They shared interests in mechanical drawing and carpentry. They loved maths at school and hated spelling. They both got the same number of headaches at the same time each day, and they both had sons called James Allen, and they both had dogs called Toy. It would seem there is a strong genetic predisposition in these people's lives. Genetic determinism is the idea that the environment has little effect on us. But is this always true? Let's have a look at 2 people. Both have the same gene for criminality. Blue is born to a single mother. A variety of uncles come and go through his life. His mum takes him to the local playgroup and then to the local school, which he finds boring. After school, he plays out and seeks risk in terms of chicken, and setting fires. As they get older, he and his friends get involved with a gang. Again, they find this very exciting. Red is born into a two-parent family, and his family unit remains stable throughout his childhood. They send him to the best local nursery, and after school they pay for cubs, tennis, swimming, and rugby to channel his energy positively. At university, he discovers mountain climbing, which feeds his need for risk. Who would be the most likely to show a criminal phenotype? Vaughan Bell says that the phrase nature versus nurture is in itself misleading, as versus indicates that they're fighting each other for supremacy. I love this quote. It's so poetic. Now have a bit of a break before you watch the flip video on gender.